Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. A few days ago, Barack Obama personally inserted himself into the Fast and Furious scandal by throwing the cloak of executive privilege over a series of documents that Attorney General Eric Holder was supposed to deliver to congressional oversight. Now, the irreplaceable John Hinderaker over at Powerline blog makes a compelling case for how legally weak this claim of privilege is in this particular case, which leaves us staring squarely at the real question, namely, why would the President of the United States tie himself directly to this issue unless there was something very, very large at stake to justify the terrible appearance of it? Well, in cases of corruption, we're often told to follow the money. But Barack Obama and Eric Holder are not people who are primarily motivated by money, but as community organizers, civil rights lawyers, and so on, something motivated them to achieve national level office, and that something is ideology. So if we're going to understand executive privilege and Fast and Furious, we need to follow the ideology. Prior to his election, Barack Obama was rated as the single most liberal member of the U.S. Senate, and one of the ongoing staples of modern progressivism is gun control. Eric Holder has long been an advocate for draconian gun control measures here in America, going so far as to say that the job of the government should be to, quote, really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way, unquote. Now, on March 30th, 2011, Barack Obama spoke to gun control advocate Sarah Brady, who said that the president told her that gun control was very much on his agenda, and who then added, quote, "I just want you to know that we're working on it," and then went on to say, "We have to go through a few processes, but under the radar," unquote. Brainwash the American people about the horrors of guns and do it under the radar. Now, early in his presidency, Barack Obama frequently repeated the falsehood that the vast majority of the guns used in the horrific Mexican drug cartel violence came from American gun dealers in order to use this mind-boggling horror down south in order to apply gun control pressure here in America. Now, this was absolutely false at the time, and the presentation of evidence showing that American guns were responsible for only a tiny sliver of all of the weapons used proved embarrassing to the man who I've noted does not take well to embarrassment. Now, back in 2008, Barack Obama ran on, among other things, a promise of millions of green jobs being created through alternative energy sources. And when these jobs didn't magically appear, he used the power of the office through debacles like Solyndra to make them appear. And I believe that Eric Holder and Barack Obama did precisely the same thing in the case of Fast and Furious. In other words, if American guns were not being used in significant numbers to use as a lever for gun restrictions on American soil, then Barack Obama and Eric Holder would supply the guns to make the case that could not be made previously. Now, it is true that George Bush's Justice Department had a program called Wide Receiver that was designed to sell guns to gun traffickers in order to catch them. But these programs are nothing like each other. Wide Receiver used protocols familiar to every narcotics department drug buy, namely controlled delivery. That means that the bad guys under surveillance buy illegal drugs or guns and are swooped down on by law enforcement officials once they commit the crime. Wide Receiver used GPS tracers in the guns. Wide Receiver was performed with the full knowledge, approval, and cooperation of the Mexican government. And when it looked like there might be some danger that these guns could, actually do some harm, the Wide Receiver program was shut down. Fast and Furious didn't use controlled delivery. It did not use tracking devices. It was not a limited number of weapons. It was thousands of them. And it was not known of or approved by Mexican law enforcement officials who simply were speechless and horrified to discover what Holder's Fast and Furious program actually did do, namely, blindly pump thousands of American assault rifles into the Mexican cartels without any chance to prevent them from doing harm. And now we get to the brass tacks, because the mainstream press has referred to Fast and Furious, when they refer to it at all, of course, as a botched law enforcement program. But PJ Media contributor Bob Owens hit the nail on the head when he said that this is nonsense, because as Owens writes, and as I believe, Fast and Furious was designed to require Mexican casualties in order for it to accomplish its mission, which was to bring back the Clinton-era assault weapons ban here in America. Now, if that is in fact the case, consider just how unrelentingly evil this idea and these two men really are. In order to achieve an ideological end that they desired here in America, one that's roundly rejected by the American people they were elected to serve and not dictate to, they pumped thousands of deadly weapons into the most violent, horrific murderers on the face of the planet today. And this ideological decision cost the lives of no less than 300 Mexican civilians, 300 people confirmed dead as a result of this ideological horror, not to mention this American hero, former Marine and Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, who was killed using weapons supplied to his murderers by Eric Holder, very likely under the direction of Barack Obama. And to those liberals who say that this is a tempest in a teapot, it's just gotcha politics, just political posturing or simple racism, let me just say this. We know who the real racists are here. You don't give a damn about these dead people because they're only Mexicans to you. They're certainly not worth politically hurting your Messiah over. If these had been 300 graphic designers in San Francisco and a university president instead of friendless peasants and a law enforcement officer, you would have dragged a Republican president out of the White House with torches and pitchforks, and you would have been right to do so. And if you find that kind of racist allegation offensive, well, welcome to our world. Just follow the ideology. Makes perfect sense. And if the mainstream media, which just a few days ago celebrated the 40th anniversary of the uncovering of a minor burglary at the Watergate complex as the greatest act of freedom in the history of the Republic, has any shred of decency or credibility left, they would realize that this is Watergate with 300 dead people lying on the ground. Have you no shame, you so-called reporters and journalists? Have you no shame at all?